we might kick off today, and I know Hazel is trying to get here as quickly as possible. She's having technical issues, so I might do the start and the introduction, and we might just switch the line up a little bit if that's okay with everybody. So I suppose good afternoon. Welcome to the first Women's Philanthropy Circle of 2021. I'm Amy Carr. I'm the Director of Fundraising and Marketing at Focus Island. It's great that so many people have joined us today, especially where we're still online. And I know this isn't the start that we were hoping for the year, but today we have two very special guests for you. Firstly, we're going to be introducing you, if she manages to make it on time, to the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Hazel Chu, after which we are going to be joined by Adrian Quinn, who's Service Manager at Focus Island. We might switch those around if we need to. And at the end, I'll make sure that we've got time for some questions so that you can put your questions to them. So if you're thinking about that during the session, please put them in the Q&A box and I'll come back to them at the end. I'm really hoping that on a dull and overcast day in February, we might actually be able to lift your spirits a little bit and leave you feeling a little inspired after the session. So I know there's a lot of people joining us for the first time this morning, and I thought as that was the case, what we might do is remind ourselves about why the circle exists and what we hope to achieve together. So the Women's Philanthropy Circle exists to prevent young people from becoming homeless. And last year, Focus Island worked with nearly 450 young people who are at risk of homelessness. 29 young people didn't enter homelessness as a direct result of our family mediation services, which was piloted with funds raised from the Women's Philanthropy Circle. And it was so successful in its first year that TUSLA added an additional mediator in its second year. Additionally, 56 young people moved on from Focus Island's youth services to start their independent lives. And we couldn't have done that without the support of the unique women who are members of this circle. As many of you may know, Focus Island is a solutions-based organisation, and all our services are focused on and committed to ending homelessness. And there's two key ways that we do that. Firstly, through preventing homelessness, which is the most effective solution. It prevents children, young people and adults from experiencing the trauma of homelessness. And secondly, we work by helping people who are homeless exit homelessness permanently, putting the right supports around them to enable them to do that. Young people aged 16-24 that the Women's Philanthropy Circle supports are one of the core groups that Focus Island work with. And over the years, we've developed a significant amount of knowledge and expertise in this area and have become a leading agency working with this group. All our services that work with young people fall into the preventative strand. And that's because youth homelessness is preventable and that there's no real reason why any young person should become homeless. Unlike other forms of homelessness, we know who is at risk and we know where and when they're likely to become homeless. And this is because a key route into homelessness for young people is when they leave state care at the age of 18. When people leave the care system, often they have no support network. So many of us, when we leave home for the first time, we'd have the support of family and friends to help guide us into adulthood. For young people leaving the care system, sometimes and quite often, that support network isn't there for them. Many have had disrupted educations. Confidence and self-esteem has often been eroded, and they can face difficulties accessing private rented accommodation. And I think we all know how competitive the rental market is, particularly in Dublin. So they face huge challenges. And that's really where Focus Island steps in to help them make the transition to independent living. Through our aftercare and our Youth Housing First programmes, our key work is help young people develop life skills, access education, training and employment, and help them navigate complicated systems to help them find stable and secure long-term accommodation. And preventing homelessness is critical to protecting these young people who have had a difficult start in life. You'd never want anyone to end up having to access adult homeless services.
Okay,
but that is
talk to you soon. Remember me. Hi, sorry. I was just calling them to tell them, yes, I am getting in now, because our systems here are down. So so it hasn't been pleasant at all morning. Sorry.
No problem at all, Hazel. It's great to have you with us. We were just explaining that you were having some technical problems. So yes. I was just doing a brief introduction, if that's okay. And we'll put you up next. I was just kind of explaining the order. So I'm just doing a brief introduction at the moment, and then we'll introduce you and then Adrian, who's in our service team.
Okay, perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. So as I was saying, preventing youth homelessness is critical to preventing vulnerable young children, young people. They've often had very difficult starts in life. And when they have to access adult homeless services, they do so at a very impressionable stage in their life. And once in these services, they can be exposed to high-risk behaviours. And these behaviours can escalate rapidly and make the works that organisations like Focus Island do much more difficult. And the trauma of being homeless as a young person is something that can affect them well into their adult life. But as I mentioned, young people are at a highly impressionable stage in their lives. And with the right supports, this can be a hugely significant moment in their life. One of the things that I think is really special about the services of young people is that they take a really person-centric approach. So we don't operate a one-size-fits-all for our young people. It's really about the young person and their life, and our key workers support and facilitate them to achieve their own goals. Our young people are really encouraged and empowered to take ownership and responsibility of their own futures, to set their own plans, achieve their goals, and really we help them to reach that level of independence that will become critical to their future. So we help them to develop confidence and belief in themselves that they can do that. And I think, as most people here know, it only takes one person's support to make all the difference in your life, that one person that will champion you and believe in you. I mentioned earlier about family mediation and the programme that we have there. And we've used the funding from this group to fund existing programmes of work, but also to pilot new programmes. And Focus Island, as you may know, is a research-led organisation. We actively listen to our customers to understand not only how we'll improve existing services, but how we might meet unmet needs. And youth mediation was one such pilot programme, which was so successful, as I mentioned, in its first year, that TUSA funded an additional role so that we could be there for more young people in its second year. And since then, it's really gone from strength to strength, preventing 29 young people last year from becoming homeless. So family mediation prevents homelessness by intervening at a most critical time in the breakdown of a family. For these young people, we mediate between the young person and their family to try and address the issues that have led to breakdown and to keep them in the family home before it progresses to a stage where they leave the home with nowhere to go. So by joining the Women's Philanthropy Circle, you can really make a significant difference in the lives of young people who need us at that critical point in their lives. The Women's Philanthropy Circle came about after we'd had a number of conversations with women who wanted to do more than just donate to Focus Island. They wanted to have a real impact and make a difference to the people that we work with. And that's as true today as it was 6 years ago when we started. And we have an inspirational group of women who donate €100 a month to make a real difference to the lives of those young people. But they don't just support the Women's Philanthropy Circle. Over time, we've built really great relationships, and they support our campaigns, they get their companies involved, and really importantly, they champion our work. And pre-COVID, we were having physical meetings, and we heard from amazing guest speakers and kept everybody updated on the progress of the work that we were undertaking, introducing you to different people from within the Focus Island team. And while 2020 was not the year that I hoped for, it would be, we still managed to continue having those wonderful meetings with brilliant guest speakers who provided thought-provoking conversations throughout the year. And there's no doubt that our first guest speaker of 2020 will be the same. So I guess I'm so delighted you turned up when you did, because otherwise I was rearranging everything. Hazel is the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Hazel Chu. Hazel is only the 9th female Lord Mayor of Dublin, and I think we're nearly at 700 at this stage, so really hugely impressive. Following from the local elections last year, Hazel also won the highest percentage vote of a first-time candidate ever recorded in a local election. She's committed to making Dublin a better place for us all to live in, tackling many issues head-on and forwarding agendas such as integration, an integration strategy, community development and the city development plan. But I think Focus Ireland really welcomed that on becoming Lord Mayor, she established a task force on homelessness to bring political leadership to tackling the crisis of homelessness in Dublin. We know that Hazel has spoken on the issue of homelessness frequently, and her approach will help to ensure that ending homelessness remains a top priority on both a local and national level. We strongly believe that we can end homelessness, and we're delighted to collaborate with the Lord Mayor to achieve this. We've invited her today to tell you a little bit about herself and her story. So I'd like to introduce you to the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Hazel Chu. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Hazel.
Unmute. Thanks, Amy. And I'm sorry for interrupting you mid-flow there. I actually
not at all.
myself, Adrian, and the Focus Ireland box. I was like, oh, it's just the 4 of us. So not
still the Zoom
there
meetings.
There was 50 other people in the room. So hi, everyone else in the room.
Thank you.
So that was not the first time I randomly barged into people's meetings and disrupted people. So it's lovely to be here, and it's actually lovely to see a lot of familiar names in the attendees box. 1 or 2 I have to actually get back to, so this is a good reminder as well. But thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the attendees who have been donating. It's an invaluable cause, and it's actually a brilliant way to come together to actually see what we can do together in terms of tackling homelessness. I like to say a big thank you to Focus Ireland from working with Mike and others. It's been really quite heartbreaking on many levels to see what the crisis is we have in Ireland, in Dublin, in terms of homelessness. It's heartbreaking when you watch things like RT Investigate and see firsthand how people are suffering. But we are also trying to do as much as we can, but we aren't doing enough. That's a matter of fact more than anything else. I'm meeting the Minister of Housing this Friday with the Homeless Task Force members to talk about some of the asks that we had put through before Christmas in relation to tackling homelessness. I hope that he can progress forward. There is one thing that will help reduce homelessness full stop is building, and we need to build more public housing across the board, and we need to do that sooner than later. But this conversation was more so Amy and Focus Ireland inviting me to talk to yourselves about me. So I'm open to questions afterwards, because it's kind of hard when people say, here, talk about yourself for a few minutes. So I'm going to launch into, I guess, how this started, how I got here. I know a few of you would have heard at this stage, and I guess what the plan next is to do as well. My own journey began with politics in 2014. I would have been involved in student politics. I would have been in a different a career industry at that stage. I was working corporate. Before that, I was working for NGOs and also for music industries. Funny enough, I was talking to someone I met recently that I worked in Electric Picnic for, and we both kind of sat there going, oh, look how times have changed. You're in a completely different job, and so am I. But I started off in law first. I would have qualified from the Inns. Before that, I was in politics and history. And it wasn't, as I said, until 2014, I got involved in politics. And even then, I got into the background of politics. I got into the management side. I ran my other half's election campaign, and I got to the stage where I thought, oh, I'm good at kind of running campaigns and coordinating. And I ended up working in the background a lot for the Greens. And it got to a stage then, I had Alex, our child, and it made me realize, oh, hang on, there's not actually a lot of people that would look like her, because she looks exactly like me, and look like her, that would be in politics. So when she grows up, who is she going to look up to? Obviously, there's amazing people in the area, and there's amazing women in every industry, but I guess for me, I zoned in on the whole, the line that that you've heard a lot of is, you can't be what you can't see. So I was quite worried for her on, well, would it form barriers or ceiling for her to think, well, just people of color, of diverse backgrounds wouldn't be in politics. So, and it was the same for me when I was younger. I didn't see anyone in politics. So even when I decided to run, my first question was to myself wasn't, how well will I do? It was, would people be okay with this? So, and that's what I hear a lot of from people within diverse communities, to asking the question of whether people, others would accept them. And this is why we need to do it, because it shouldn't be the question of whether others would accept you. It's whether that shouldn't even be a valid question in the first place, I guess, in my mind nowadays. It's very much, it should be so normal, and our society should have everyone at the table, that question doesn't even come into play in people's head. And that most people like me or my daughter or anyone else going into any career would just go without thinking about it. So would just try to run for whatever they want to run, or work in wherever they want to work in. One of my most heartbreaking moments was when I was sitting on a panel for the Immigration Council of Ireland, and there was a dad there with his little girl. And he was a person of color. And he said to me, listen, I've been working 2 jobs, working really hard, really want to make sure my family's okay. And for my little girl, I guess what the problem for her is, she doesn't see a lot of people like her in various industries. And she asked me what she can do in future. And I would really love to tell her that she can do anything she wants in future. So, and that really broke my heart, because it was a grown man there, almost in tears, standing there saying to me that, listen, I can't tell my little girl whether she can do everything or not, because right now there are barriers, and right now there's not enough of everyone at the table to show that little girl that you can be whatever you can want to be. So, and that's for myself why I went into it, because I figured, win or lose, you know, it's worth a try. And I have to say, thank you still to everyone who voted for me, because it was something that I didn't expect. And I guess coming out of that then, when the mayoralty came up, I just kind of went, right, I'll give that a shot too, and see how I get on with that one. So, so the journey has been plotted along on the
I'll just see if we can get Hazel back there a second. Bear with us a moment. Sorry, Hazel, I think you just cut out for a minute there.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that when I was a councillor, I sat on the housing SPC for that reason, because I wanted to make sure we go in the right direction when it comes to housing and homelessness. And SPC stands for Strategic Policy Committee, for those who hate acronyms as much as I do. So, from there, when I was in the Lord Mayoralty in this office, it became very obvious to me that this was my chance to make sure that we put homeless issues on the map. But the council and others, people here, people who have been supporting, have been trying, have been doing so much work in that space. But again, we still always hit brick walls when it comes to the issue. So the first thing I was told was, listen, this role will be very ceremonial. You'll be going out a lot. You'll be talking to the community a lot. You'll be cutting a lot of ribbons. So you won't really have time for the policy side, and you really won't have time for the things that you were planning to do. And lo and behold, COVID hit. Well, we were through COVID at that stage, and we were going through COVID, but what had happened was lockdown hit again. So it gave me some room to go back to the council managers and say, listen, I know this is not what the Lord Mayor normally does, but this is what I would like to do. And you can say no with our particular ask, or you can come along and actually play a part and build this as it goes along. And I have to say, they were really quite supportive. They were very enthusiastic on the fact that I wanted to build a homeless task force, that I wanted to put in an integration strategy, that when it comes to COVID mobility, that I was hoping to champion whatever projects they did. So whatever, I guess, we always look at local government and national government even and say there's a lot of red tape and there's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a hell of a lot of it. So, but equally, I think what COVID has done in every industry, including in the civil and public service, it's changed people's mindset a good bit, and it's changed how people work. And in terms of the city council, they have been working full steam when it comes to frontline issues, and there's a lot of planning now when it comes to the background that they're trying to get right as well. And they're not always going to get it right, but I really think with the city development plan, with what we're going to roll down the road when it comes to nighttime economy, this is a huge opportunity that we have. I was thinking, looking at the points of what people wanted to hear. I guess the best thing is to ask people if they have questions for me, because I can tell you all about my career and go on, but I think for me the most important part, or the turning point of my own career, was interestingly when my best friend passed away, and that was 10 years ago. It was at that point I realized, listen, A, you're more than a little burnt out at this stage, and B, you just don't have the bandwidth to deal with everything at the moment. So I went on a very long trip volunteering in China, in a school in China, and also went traveling as well. And by the time I came back, I was able to change focus on my career. But sometimes it doesn't even take that. Sometimes like I look at my friends and I look at my other half, like literally Patrick came home one day after 15 years of working as a child protection social worker and working in the homeless area. He used to work for wet hostels on with the Paul Trust. He used to work in the industry, and he came home one day and he suddenly just said, yeah, I'm going to run for local election. And I was like, oh, really? So like, really? And he just goes, yeah, I had a particularly hard case today where I wasn't getting anywhere. And I just realized it was a policy change. And if anything, I'm going to go into that space. I'm going to help change it. I was like, sure, you do that. But that's the thing. A lot of when I saw the line here of a turning point, a lot of time the turning point is it just happens. But sometimes it's also thankfully thanks to someone who's guiding you as well. I was lucky enough to have very good mentors along the way of my career. I had a great one called Tanya Clark in Diageo. I had one, bless him, he's passed away now, called Dave Fahy, that I met through the Chief Scientific Advisor's Office. So these people were instrumental to how I have come here. Catherine Martin would be one nowadays, that she's a friend of mine, and we would talk about the issues, and we would talk about like the difficulty of governing, but also the not just the difficulty of governing, but difficulty of governing through pandemic, to make sure you protect the most vulnerable, because that's our job. So anyway, I'll cut it to there. If there's any questions, I think that might kind of be better.
Absolutely. What I might do, if it's okay, Hazel, is I'd like to ask people to, am I on my mute? No. Sorry, I thought I was on mute for a second there. What I might ask people to do is to put their questions into the Q and A box, and while they're doing that, we might just hear from Adrian, who works in our he was a project manager for Focus Island. So Adrian has worked in the homeless sector since 2004, which I couldn't believe when I was talking to him earlier, in a variety of capacity and roles. And there's probably few areas of homelessness that he hasn't been involved in this stage. So he's worked in existing projects, but also been instrumental in new programmes and models of working to tackle homelessness in Ireland. He's presently a service manager for the Dublin region with a specific focus on housing, which Hazel was talking about earlier. And he is also responsible for our preparation for education, training and employment programmes, so that we really give people that foundation that they can live independently. So I think over 17 years, Adrian has developed a deep understanding of homelessness and seen how important the early interventions are, which we mentioned. And if you have, while Adrian's talking, if you have questions for Hazel and Adrian, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we get a good, decent amount of time at the end to go through them, if that's okay. Adrian, I'm going to hand over to you for a few seconds, if that's okay.
Thanks very much for having me. This is not the space where I normally work, so apologies if the nerves come through. I would have thought the fact that I can't see everyone would make it a little easier, but it doesn't. And the fact that my 1.5-year-old tore up all of my notes an hour ago is not, and having to scramble to get them back together. So thanks very much for the time and the space to talk, and thanks very much to Lord Mayor for joining as well. Actually, funnily enough, before I started in Focus in 2004, I was a paramedic and in manning the medical tent at Electric Picnic as well when it started there as well. So just remembered. So as Amy was saying, I manage and can over our housing services across the Dublin area. We have a lot of different models, either housing on its own, be it apartments and homes, or community settings where it's maybe 30, 50 kind of homes together, living as a community with supports on site or supports visiting people, and then some specialist services, some for women, some for young people, in our education training program. And I suppose what I'm seeing is the worrying trend is that longer and longer times in emergency accommodation for people and families. And yes, I'm talking about young people. The young people for me, they are the young adults, parents, and also the children that are coming through homelessness at the minute. And they all present with unique histories, unique challenges, and hopes and needs as well. But common to all is just the trauma of actually becoming homeless. And that longer stint and that longer and growing time in homelessness, that additional trauma experience it edges away at the resilience, the wellness, and subsequently the impact on child welfare and development, both the adults and children alike, is increasingly concerning. And it's why our focus is constantly on long-term housing options and wraparound support. And again, I've spent a long time over the years, worked a lot in the area kind of with people sleeping rough, with older adults, the older men and women that have slept rough in our parks, and completely disenfranchised and disconnected from society for years, and young adults out in the street. And talking about and thinking about prevention, my worry is that for a growing number of kids, we're seeing that those early instances of trauma and crisis happen right now. That's the thing that ties the kids and the young people coming through homelessness now to the older people that I've worked with over the years. They experienced some level of trauma that shook their fundamental sense of safety. It might be sleeping in cars rather than institutional care or abuse, but it's a common trauma, and I can see that happening for this next generation of who become the young adults and the older kids or the older adults. And it really actually just breaks my heart, to be honest. But it has to embolden and resolve, and it does. And it's why we need to ensure really timely access to housing, housing all the way to get that safety and that safe space, but then also the clinical and the specialist supports into each adult and child alike. Our particular range of services that I look after in Dublin. We supported over 940 households in 2020, which was incredible when I counted it all up. And that's households out of homelessness in their own accommodation. And there's just under 900 children and just under 1,400 adults, and a lot of them young adults who are the head of the household as well. I was trying to think of the impact of the last year in COVID and how we adapted, and it's extremely hard to pin down, to be honest, because we're still in it. We're still in the peak of the surge and dealing with it. But first and foremost, we've been really successful in keeping COVID-19 out. Extremely low numbers of infections across all of our services. The people we support to date, it's a huge testament to everyone. But it has been one of the most challenging years all around. It's impacted our customers. It affected all of us personally. It affected how our services could run safely, to stay open. But every service we worked to adapt really, really quickly. Early on, in most instances, we stayed ahead of the curve, to my mind, before guidance started to come through while everybody was reorganizing. And then we linked in, got new practices and approaches. And I think because of our approach to homelessness has always been wraparound support and your own door, your own home. It meant that all of our customers are young people or families, they were in their own accommodation. So that lent itself to being able to keep people safe very early, very quickly. But the multiple challenge then of protecting people from COVID came with where we've seen the impact, and that was the isolation, the anxiety, and the breakdown in linkages to some of the normal support networks that we rely on, such as social work, education, home helps, occupational health, mental health, and child support. Particularly early on, they all dropped away, and some of them came back then as well during other lockdowns. But what we worked to do is make sure that there was consistent support from our teams, from our child family support workers, to fill the gaps where we could, where it was needed. Providing a lot of support around translation, particularly for families that were in homeless accommodation already. Where English mightn't be their most proficient language, where there's a huge slew of information coming from HSE and from ourselves around COVID-19 and social distances. So we got some support from very kind donors as well, to get translation support in that. A lot of linkages and strengthening relationships with healthcare providers and mental health teams, and bringing in support from learning and education platforms to support the parents. And again, young adults and young parents with homeschooling, who are trying to figure out how to be parents themselves while they're trying to insulate the kids from being homeless or recently being homeless, and trying to create as safe and as normal environment in as abnormal a space without all the supports that I am lucky to have in terms of family networks. And there was huge amount of collaboration grew across the sector then, from the HSC to the local authorities, and then our own teams again and again, taking on more and more, going above and beyond to fill the gaps, even down to simple things and making sure that food deliveries were done and getting homework supplies into families that were self-isolating without childcare. Our education service, it went to online pretty quickly, started doing more remote learning, and they took on any work that was needed and any support that was needed as well. Everybody worked outside of their usual kind of wheelhouse. We grouped our teams together that if me and a few others got caught up and had to quarantine, that another team would step in. So every service stayed open, there was no dip in service or support for anyone that needed it. I said that I think every team and every department and focus, they brought about as much energy and creativity as they could muster to save Santa, which became a bit of a lightning rod at the end of the year for everyone. And with real kind support again from donations and generosity of I think a lot of people here as well. Every family had the support to make sure that Santa found the kids. A lot of innovative and socially distant Santa grottos popping up around the city, and it was really, really timely and a huge lift, and just it needed to happen. Our peak team supported about 150 people, 85 of them into training and education, 37 into mainstream employment. About a third of those are young adults, the 18 to 24 mark, all with histories of homelessness. I really can't understate my admiration for the teams in the last year. Their ability to stay composed, dedicated, and be present for anyone who needed it was just amazing. the resilience of the families and young people and adults and kids that we have the privilege of working with has been incredible. Again, they had to tackle the same anxieties as the rest of us, but in far too many circumstances, without that security that we have and can take for granted sometimes, without the access to the support networks from families, even from afar for all of us. And even those that went into homes, the time to recover from homes can take time. So it just, again, it was amazing to see. We're still there, we're still working hard, so are they. We did see, in terms of some nice outcomes that were really, really lovely, in one of our community housing sites, we really seen the mental health impact on the community, and a lot of really complicated, serious issues around self-harm and even suicide and child protection issues, and a lot of this playing out in this really public kind of courtyard. Families, singles, all living there together. We worked really tirelessly to keep everybody safe, and we were successful in that. But there was a lot of caution then that it took its toll on the community around. And one of the residents, one of the older residents, who was himself at one point, and was chatting to him, a young man in an institution or homeless in his own life, he took it upon himself to start playing the tin whistle on the steps for everybody, and the windows started to come up again. And it was really, really lovely, and it really worked. People started to come back out, reclaim the space, and it was lovely. I'm actually getting choked up a little bit. I'm very sorry. But again, another example maybe of something that was an unintentional example of everyone pulling together to pull through and to keep our community safe and to work through it. We have a family support team in Dublin that visits any household that we house and provide housing for. They're supporting just under 300 households across the city at the minute, fairly intensively. We had a family with a long history of single mom, a huge amount of domestic violence in her history, a bereavement of a child, and she had 4 children when she became homeless, fleeing domestic violence. Really, really complex trauma. She was only 19 at the time. Herself, a history of care when she was 15. The 3 of the kids having special support needs as well, special education needs, and again, going through homeless services, fleeing violence. Huge traumatizing, very, very complicated space. Our child support workers and family support workers were in there every day trying to help them insulate and normalize and recover, while our housing teams found housing and brought it in, and we got them housed. And this was before last year. We got them housed, and the way that we work, we continue to work with people for the long haul, whatever level of support that they need. It could be daily, sometimes it could be weekly, it could be monthly. Sometimes it could be just a social check-in to see how they're doing and help reconnect. And again, one of the other complexities that happened is this man, because of all her issues and what was going on, her reliance on alcohol when she was homeless, had become an issue. But I have to say, the families and the team's ability to keep pushing forward, keep looking towards kind of hope and a recovery and a better life, and the man engaging in that, and the kids engaging. The 2 older kids are 16 and 17 now, going through really, really complicated, tricky counselling themselves. We got them linked in with mental health teams, school teams. They're all in school now. 2 kids are on track to finish their Leaving Cert, which is just incredible. The youngest is getting ready to go into primary school. And when that happens, Mum is completely focused she wants to get back working. So she's going to link in with our PEAT service. That's a little ways away, but even that, her Mum is now thinking about herself and her own well-being. And she's still only 20 now at this point, I think. But she's now forward planning for herself, for her family, and it's amazing. The two older lads, great GAA players as well, apparently, and they joined the team, which took some time for them to kind of get comfortable in their peer groups. But really, really incredible to see that happening. That's just an example. We have a lot of them, but looking ahead and kind of where the challenges are and what we're sort of doing and focusing on ahead, the health inclusion, the dealing and supporting around the trauma and the therapeutic support for the stuff that we can't see. Like, we are very, very aware, and I think we're all aware of the big ticket items in terms of housing schools and education is, but it's what we're not looking at the minute as well. I'm constantly thinking of the guy that lived in Phoenix Park for 20 years, and looking back through that lens, and my worry is I'm seeing a number of those children that could be them, and we need to increase our ability to bring in specialist clinical supports to these kids and to these young adults and families, if we're going to ensure that they can recover and access. And it's really, really vital. We want to increase our child and family supports. We have a lot there. We're really, really good at it. It's something we do take pride in. Be fairly awkward about sort of making a statement like that, but I'm pretty confident we're good at that. But we need more. We have to, and we're working on that. We're working on reaching out to partners and stakeholders. And we need to continue to expand our remote learning platforms. We want to get our PEAK program from a drop-in to make sure that every household can access that, and all they need is a laptop. So we've gotten some good wins and funding coming in. So we're hoping to expand on that again, really insulate all our services, that regardless of what level or track this COVID thing takes this year, that the experience for our customers would be steadier, and that's what we want. And we'll keep continuing to expand our housing options to get people out of homelessness and prevent people going in where we can. That's our bread and butter. So that's it. I probably go on for an hour, and I'm really sorry if I've gone over time, but thanks very much to everyone here as well for supporting us. The family mediation support, again, those are the bits, those are the cracks, the really, really vital cracks that we need to kind of fill in, and it's your support does that. So thank you on behalf of all the teams that I work with. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. That's brilliant. Really appreciate you coming along this morning. We've had a load of questions come in now. I think the first one is for Hazel, so I'll go straight over to you. I think this is to do with you and your partner. So as both of you are in politics, is it hard to separate that in the home environment, or do you have rules that you put in place in terms of not talking about it at home?
We just don't talk anymore, Amy. So that's what we've started doing, like, at this point. No, like, I don't know.
Especially during COVID.
Well, I don't know how many parents we have. Sorry, sniffles. I'm allergic to this office, actually. Every time I go on a call, I sniffle a bit, and everyone kind of gives me one of these looks. I don't know how many parents we have on this call, but when you have young children, as Adrian says, you get very little done, and then in the evening you're kind of half songed. So do we talk about politics? We do a lot. We actually, funny enough, we talk, because of his background working in the homeless sector. We talk about homeless and housing a lot. So whenever I come home from a meeting about homelessness, he doesn't give out to me, but he kind of goes, did you ask about that, or did you bring up that point? I'm there going, why don't you just join our meetings? Would that be better for you? So we talk about politics a lot. We talk about the different things that we care about. I guess that kind of drew us together a good bit. And then sometimes we just don't talk. We end up watching Netflix and going, you know what, you sit over there, I'm sitting over here, and just like, we're not talking at all. So
it's good sometimes to have the boundary. I think sometimes when you're not actually working in the same thing, it's easier, especially while you're working from home, because you can talk about these things. But when you're both working in the same thing, the boundaries are good. I have another question here. It might be one that you both want to speak about a bit, but it's how can we tackle the situation during COVID, where there are many clear Airbnbs were put back on the market for renting and skew the kind of the housing market for buyers and renters.
I'll let Adrian take it first.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think I was overdone in my introduction of being an expert, but to my mind anyway, the problem driving homelessness in Ireland is an insecure housing market, and a lot of that is with the private rented market. So for me, housing, and I'm thinking that we're working with the more the complex end of things, and the more kind of stuck and entrenched, and private rent is not the answer there either. We need secure long-term housing, and we need it now. And so it does, to me, it's a bit of a red herring in itself. It is there, and it's an option for a lot of people on that aren't homeless, and that maybe are at risk of homeless and need to move around. But again, they're generally at risk of homeless because of an unstable private rented market as well. So to me, it's a red herring, and it's a stopgap maybe in general, and it's secure housing for everybody. That this isn't, it's not just about improving the quality of emergency accommodation and getting people out quicker. It's stopping the flow in altogether. Like, we have to be able to do three things at the same time here, or we're on a hamster wheel.
You're talking more about kind of maybe more local authority housing and that kind of thing, Adrian.
Just social housing, a stronger security of tenure. I'll take a private rented market in Airbnb if it's got long-term security of tenure. That's insulated against market forces. So whether it's local authority provided by an approved housing body like Focus or another, or the private rented market takes on a model that's got long-term security, is the safety and predictability of that long-term that the families need.
On just to follow up on that, Amy, I think one of the things, I know a few of us looked into it in terms of Airbnb and the transparency of I guess there's confinements within GDPR, but then there also needs to be a certain transparency on how many units across any particular area is within Airbnb. So because once you have that data, then you can see what you're tackling. But currently, any discussions we had with Airbnb, they've been kind of saying, well, GDPR issues and other issues, we can't. So it becomes really tricky, because to your attendees' question, like, does it skew the rental market? Yeah, absolutely. So when you have Airbnbs going on at €150 per night, when that property could be rented for €1,000 a month, then it completely skews the rental market completely. That and student accommodation as well. One of the things that I've been saying to the manager within DCC is that we have so much student accommodation that was built for the purpose of filling in with students nationally and internationally. That is now not happening. So what are we going to do with those spaces? Can we convert them into temporary own door accommodation for the meantime, while also looking at the bigger picture that Adrian's pointing at, of the solution of needing to build more? We need to build more social housing. We need to build more affordable homes. That's what we need to do. But while doing that, to his point, we need to also fix the various issues cropping up in our rental sector as well.
I've got a lovely comment here for you, Hazel, and a question. So hi, Hazel, you're a wonderful role model. So thank you for stepping up so that people can see you and be inspired to act themselves. You've talked about becoming involved in policy formation in order to help change happen. Has this been a frustrating process, or do you see change really happening?
It's been a really frustrating process. So I'm sure someone will slap me for saying that, but I tend to be quite honest wherever I speak these days. But it's been a really frustrating process, because people, in terms of drawing a policy, there is an eagerness. And I think sometimes, especially when it's COVID and people have gone through COVID and understand that there's necessary changes, that this is a good, and I hate to call it opportunity, because we have had so much loss and pain, but it is opportunity there to progress when it comes to policy and change how legislation works. But I've also noticed a distinct, we'll look at this when things are further down the road, or we'll look at this when things get better. Things aren't going to get better until you start looking at it now. So, and it's been a lot of door banging and trying to change things. And I don't know, I'll be honest, I love to promise people saying by the end of this, we'll have every thing from looking at harm reduction policy change to looking at how communities work in terms of integration. I love to promise that, but I can't. But what I can say is we need to keep pushing until until it happens. And be it in this role or out of this role, that's what I'll be doing. I hope, however, the policies do change, especially when it comes to homeless and housing. They do change when it comes to community and integration, and they do change when it comes to looking at overall equal rights and how we live in the city. So.
Great. Another question for you here, Hazel, from an environmental point of view, what are your hopes for the College Green project? How do you plan to persuade stakeholders not in favour of the project to collaborate effectively? Big question, but
again,
we've got 5 minutes, so if you can answer it in that time, that would be great.
Answer in one is that the collaboration needs to be through working together, because I've seen so many projects in Dublin that have worked really well in the last year through COVID that gets installed and people have pushback because they don't like the change but then they also feel like they haven't been consulted, which is fair. So so in this particular College Green project, we sent out a consultation. There was, I think, a 90% return rate, so it was massively in favor of one option. So now what we need to do is try to make sure we work together with those who aren't in favor, but also just bring everyone along, because those who weren't consulted need to understand what's happening as well. And the College Green project, I'm hoping, will be in the next year or so that we will see some kind of it's been literally on the roundabout for so long. I think we need to do something about it now. So
great. We've actually come, I think, to about time, but if we had chance for one last question, I'd love to put this one to both of you, if that's okay. I think a lot of people have become desensitized to the homeless crisis, and there's a lot whataboutery and with other issues. How can we as a community work together to keep highlighting it as a real issue, and what can politicians and the media do better?
Adrian first.
So I suppose it's to keep, I mean, each of us has, like say, and I suppose on the community side of what we can do each individually is to think of like what's our circles of influence or spheres of influence, whether it's within our work settings or for home or community settings, and to keep talking about it, keep learning more about it as well. Definitely digging under the headlines sometimes and where the media is going. Sometimes I find that it can be reactionary as well. Like that's the nature of media as well, is to get read, and that can sometimes skew the complexity of the issue. And even that is a bit of a misnomer, because it's simple issues, but very, very complicated systems, and maybe complicated and complex ways that the solutions are needed, but it is simple issues. So I think of the spheres of influence we have to reach out like this. This is an amazing platform for people to take an interest and learn, and to go out and have dialogue. If people need support on getting the message out, or there's an interest area that somebody is connected in with, reach out and talk. So I'm happy to come along and talk to anybody. Have any chance to get to talk, I'll keep going. But I think that, and I do that myself. So like, what's my sphere of influence, circle of influence? I think the media, we need to work with them as well, around what messages need to get out there, what stories need to get out there, and how they need to be portrayed. I don't know how we do that yet. I'll probably leave that end, maybe the politics end of it with yourself. I might defer over if that's all right. Sorry, I'm conscious we're running out of time as well. So
thanks, Adrian. Yay, I caught the ball. I think Adrian hit something on the head there, and I was thinking about this recently. The reactionary nature of how things are these days, and be it that because we're through COVID that we're so exhausted that everything is so much, and we're just reacting to things, and we're trying, and things get really divisive. So even when people care about the same issues like homelessness, there's a huge amount of discourse there, and it doesn't help anyone. It really doesn't help, especially the person who's sleeping on a tent in the canal. It really doesn't. So like my thing is, at the end of the day, if people can work together, so if people want to promote the cause of homelessness and want to actually support donating, getting involved in this space, getting groups like this really help. Understanding what the likes of yourselves do at Focus Ireland, seeing how they can help on a voluntary level or donation level really helps as well. Because I've seen it so many times on social media, on various other medias, is there's a story to tell, and we tell the story, and the story sometimes is mostly heartbreaking because we are in an emergency crisis when it comes to homelessness. But on the other side of things, then you get people who and politicians are the worst of them. I can tell you, I'm being in the area myself, is that you then use, but you have people using it as a political football, when it really does not need to be one. Like, even talking about simple things like housing developments and building housing developments, it suddenly becomes a political football of who isn't building and why aren't they building and how much, and it becomes this kind of debate publicly, where really the pressure should be back to the department to build. So, and it's the same when it comes to homelessness, that the pressure should be back on that particular department to alleviate homelessness, to look at all the various things that they can do, be it harm reduction, be it treatment centers, all the things that they need to do, as well as the overall bigger picture of building. So from a political space, what I would recommend people doing with politicians isn't the line of, I won't vote for you if you don't work on homelessness or any of these issues. It's a simple, I won't vote for you if you don't work with other people. So there is a huge amount that can be done with unity. Like, I made a point of making sure there was every member of a party on the homeless task force for that reason, because things can be done better if we work together and we are willing to see eye to eye together. Things are more than likely less able to be done and move slower if people just continue fighting about issues. So I would say, on a political front, if people contact politicians, say, yeah, this is a pressing issue, but what I want to see you do isn't just challenge it. I want to see you working with the person right now that's in it to do something about it. So, and that will be where I would go, because like, there was a question in the chat box about would the shock ads of RSA work anymore? But we do have the shock ads. We have them from yourselves, from Peter McVerry, from other organizations, showing homelessness, showing the very heartbreaking scenes of people in a hotel or a child spending Christmas hotel. And they're really, really sad, but they're still not pushing through, because I think a lot of us seem to have become almost not immune to it, but that it's just there. Whereas right now, what we need is a momentum to push it through and to make sure people work together to fix the problem.
That's great, thank you, Hazel. I think we're over time now, but I would like to finish off by thanking the Lord Mayor, Hazel, for joining us today, and for Adrian for joining us as well, and for everybody that has come along and participated and asked questions. We actually got a flurry of questions through at the end, I think, so what we might do is take them offline and try and get you some responses, and then send them out after the meeting, if that's okay. I would just like to say as well, there's no positives about the pandemic. The response from the Women's Philanthropy Circle has been one of huge support, kindness and generosity. And on behalf of Focus Ireland, we're so grateful to all our members and to the ongoing commitment to end youth homelessness. For those of you that aren't members, I would ask, as I'm still taking it, we're still at the beginning of the year, that you make joining the Women's Philanthropy Circle your New Year's resolution. Your belief in young people will really make a difference in their lives and give them a better chance of having really kind of prosperous adult life. So if it's something that you can do, please join us, make it your New Year's resolution, and make a real difference to young people who need your support. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are meeting again on April the 22nd at 12 o'clock. We have a fantastic speaker, Sonia Deasy, who's the CEO of Pestle and Mortar, joining us there. So I hope as many of you as possible are able to join then. Thanks a million. Have a lovely afternoon and a great February. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.